Hey, broadcasting live and in studio with you guys today. This is a very special broadcast because I waited and waited until a very special young fella could join me today. So first and foremost, we'll get into that here shortly. First and foremost, I want to say welcome to the Auspicious Wellness, Optimal Wellness Podcast. Come on in, have a virtual seat at the table. We're kicking off on our Motivational Wednesday this week because I was motivated by my grandson, so I waited until Wednesday to kick off the podcast instead of Monday. We are broadcasting live in studio. My grandson is actually shadowing me this week. And you know what? We don't do ordinary, but we endeavor to bring you an extraordinary experience, the Auspicious Wellness Experience. My name is Deborah Smith Torrance, your host, and I'm a life and health coach, a manufacturing cannabinoid molecules, for short CBD, an IT developer, and also a mom and a grandmother and a wife, and I love that part of my life. So anyways, we just want to say we're broadcasting over here on these different platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Alexa, Podcasts, Podchaser, Pod Addict, Deezer, Listen Note, Podbean, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Castro, Castbox, and also Spreaker, Player FM, and FFmpg. Wherever you are in the world, whatever time you're listening to me, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And before we get started, I just want to introduce you to my grandson who is actually shadowing me. And I said, come on in. We're teaching him about the world of business, to be an entrepreneur. He's a very special young man. Let me see. You want to tell him what your name is?
Rashad.
What is your name? Rashad what?
Williams.
How old are you?
13.
And when are you going to be graduating high school? 16 years old? Oh, yes, that's what I'm talking about. You got to pull them in, get them young, start teaching them, start mentoring them, start working with them. You want to do that from a baby, you know what I'm saying? Because this is your lineage, these are your offsprings, and this is your life. And so I keep this little young man close and dear to my heart. We've got some other ones, and we're bringing them on, too. They're just a chippery, intelligent, smart, and something else. But, you know, if you want to have a future, you got to invest in your future. And the biggest investment you can make is investing into your family and your children. And that's one thing that I hold close and dear to me, very close, in my marriage, in my big old husband. And so with that being said, it's time to dig in, drill down, and dive in, take it all apart. You know what we do. We take it apart, we put it back together, and we make it all make sense. And the most important part is the biggest thing we want to do about all of this is be true to you. And that's very important, that we are true to you. And so you know where we're going to be at the virtual roundtable. And so I'm going to extend the invitation to you again. Come on in and let's take a virtual seat. And let's get started on what we're going to be talking about today. We have a power-packed episode, which I hope is relatable and comforting. Our episode today is centered around the decision to pivot in life, becoming human, leading to change. Right now, we are in a pandemic. So much is going on around us. So much. Every day we're in an ever-changing world. It's a global change. The pandemic is here. People have had to do so many things that they didn't think they would do or have to deal with or see even in this lifetime. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And so let me just give my disclaimer. This podcast is not intended to treat, diagnose, or cure any disease. Always consult with your medical professional to seek medical advice for any condition. So let's get started. In the course of our lifetime, we as human beings, we will encounter many phases of growth. Sometimes it's uncomfortable growth leading to change in our life. All change is not going to feel comfortable, and we don't get to pick and choose what changes that we're going to have to make in life. Sometimes they just fall at our feet, on our doorstep, wherever we meet the change at. And so it's about, today's episode is about learning how to really literally deal with change, because That's something that a lot of times, it's something as simple as changing something in your wardrobe. Some people say, oh, I want that. Don't throw that away. I've been having that all these years. Okay. And then another person, well, aren't you tired of it? Don't you think it's time to just get something new? So it could be just as simple as that, or just as so important as changing a job, changing where you live. And these are the things that we're going to talk about today, and how we make that pivot. These changes either come from within, or sometimes when someone else makes a decision that causes us to decide to make a change, leading to what we call pivoting. And now everywhere we hear pivot, 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 but we hear it, but we're not really understanding, but it really is a buzzword right now. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this. Okay, what does pivot mean? Okay, it's referring to a specific business change ranging from mild to dramatic. It could be something in your life. It could be an action, and it's actionable. A pivot is usually intended to help a business recover from a tough period or survive after experiencing new competition or other factors that make the original business more unsustainable. Now, you also have to pivot in life, because right now, because of the coronavirus, we're all pivoting. We all know that. We're all pivoting how we interact with people, how we go outside, how we cover our face, washing our hands, being more intentional about what we bring in our home, washing, stripping off at the door, taking all of our clothes off, throwing them in the wash machine, all these different things just so that we don't bring germs in our house, so that we can help the world to stop the spread of coronavirus. Now, let's relay this to you as a person. This podcast episode is really around the uncomfortable changes we must make because of the pandemic. We now find ourselves in this thing all around the world, and it's global, and it's just undeniable. It's something that we can't even really wrap our brains around, even leading into how our legislatures have to rule on laws to help us, even leading into politics. It's just everywhere. This pandemic, it knows no bounds. It's just what it is. It's a pandemic, and it's a virus. I truly, really hope that today this podcast was going to leave you with some food for thought to help you pivot wherever necessary with less stress and anxiety. The decision of change starts with a spark. When you make the decision you want to change, it's a spark. Then it's a burning desire. Then a fire within us. We are now conscious of now, the adjustment period, the pivoting. In the same way, we as human beings globally have now found ourselves pivoting in so many aspects of our lives. Human interaction, like I said, how we go outside, how we work, working from home, or looking for a career change, which could be a direct impact because of COVID-19. How our children are now learning virtually. Society has pivoted to a virtual society overnight. Often, in some situations, we often feel we don't have a choice, whether it's related to a new job offer from a company in a new city. Now you become a transplant. If you go back down, I was thinking about this the other night. I was just kind of thinking about how and when and where, and I was just thinking about this, and it just all started kind of clicking. And I got up and I started typing. Everything was just coming out of me. And if you go back down through history and look over your ancestry and trace how a family member put down roots in another state or even in another country, it's sparked by change, wanting more, or survival. It's down throughout history, human beings have learned to pivot to survive. It's the mindset and the will of the human mind. I really put some time in today's episode and some serious research. First, I want to share with you an article by the Human Foundation of Management. I want to share this with you. I even went to look at this. I wanted to find out about change. I wanted to go as deep into change as I thought I could really go without overwhelming myself. And I want to read this to you. It says, human will. We refer to the human capacity to actively decide what to do instead of reacting automatically to stimuli. Although we sometimes act impulsively and without reflection, we have the ability to select different courses of action after rational deliberation, to choose from one action from among two or more alternatives. Freedom Yes, I said freedom. Freedom is often used in social and political contexts, generally meaning the absence of external constraints. Such freedom refers to the freedom of action, which is an external freedom. This is different from the freedom of the will or free will, which is internal freedom. The latter expression, the idea that human will is not completely determined by stimuli, and therefore we are owners of our acts of choice. The desires accepted by your will or our will, and thus responsible for them or us. The existence of free will, however, has been questioned by some authors who consider it an illusion and not a reality. The position called determinism is analyzed and critically evaluated. We argue that human persons have freedom of will, although it's not absolute, but conditioned by both internal and external factors. In social and economic thought, certain authors have reduced freedom to freedom of choice with regard to subjective preferences. We argue that humans will entail self-determination after rational deliberation on both ends and means. Thus, we have freedom to make conscious and responsible choices, but simply freedom of choice. Decision-making, so crucial to management, is a matter of which reason will coincide, but feeling and emotion also have the role, as does the moral character of the decision maker. Character is shaped by trait or stable moral disposition, traditionally termed virtues if they are good, and vices if they are bad. Good stable dispositions of character reinforce the tendency to choose what one ought to do. Moral character is the basis of these moral competencies or capabilities that are so valuable in this professional and organizational context. Whoa, this is a very good read, and it leads in today's podcast centered around changes and leading to the human will to survive. We now find ourselves pivoting again just to survive. If we understand the concept, it can become our new normal and we survive. And the reason why I read this and I put this in the podcast was because right now so many people are stressed. So many people have fatigue from the pandemic, and they're calling it pandemic fatigue. So many people have. So what if we could really stop for a moment in time, regroup, and look at how we could pivot for this to become our new normal without feeling like we're being forced to do so many things we don't want to do. We either have to make a decision to live or a decision to be subjected to the virus or a decision and sometimes to lose loved ones or even ourselves. And so this is a lot for anyone to deal with, but we have to deal with it. We have to do our part in order to help the world become a safer place, to protect our children, our families, to be able to protect our neighbor. Some people say, I don't want to wear a mask. And some people think, oh, well, you can catch the virus if you don't want to wear a mask. Well, you're going to infect someone possibly if you don't want to wear a mask. What if you have the virus and you're walking around infecting people? So these are some of the things that we as human beings have to look at, cause and effect. One action from this action to that action leads to what outcomes. We have to look at these things. But it is now a reality that many families are dealing with globally. What is the direct impact here? We are carving out more time, a change in our schedules to help our children learn from home. There's so much more accountability by this interaction of a global pandemic, which has led to this change, which many have had to pivot and may very well become the new normal for some time to come for quite a few people. And so I've just typed up, I wanted to type up some examples. So I typed up some examples and I kind of thought about, what are people really dealing with? How is this, what's really going on? So this first part is part of that. A mother looks back and realizes her children are now going off to college. And she says to herself, I would have never thought I would get through this and get my children to this point. Now we remember